and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell, Donawa, attorney at law. Once again, I'm happy to be here, and of course, I'm happy to bring the law and you. Of course, we are here to educate, entertain, and of course, just to keep you informed and updated of developments of the law, as well as personal stories by various legal counsels. Today, we have a special guest, Ms. Sophia Chote, Senior Counsel of Alpha Chambers, and she'll be here to give her story and to basically talk about her journey through law and leadership. But before we have our segment, Legal Lingo, I'm sure you're ready for this week's legal word of the day. And on today's Legal Lingo, we have the word antecedents. Antecedents basically are details about the past of a defendant or a person found guilty of a crime. The information about previous crimes, background, and bad behavior is given to the court before the sentence is given. And just to give an example, a live example, now during a high court or a high-profile trial, the defense attorney presented evidence of a defendant's good antecedents, emphasizing his clean criminal record and positive contributions to the community. The attorney argued that these antecedents should be taken into account during sentencing, suggesting that lenient punishment was appropriate given the defendant's past behavior and character. So here we go, antecedents. We'll be right back. And we are back on Strictly Legal. Of course, you can stream us on WESN-CC as well as traditional media, and not forgetting our podcast, Strictly Legal with Rondell Donawa. So as I said, today we have a special guest in studio, and her name is Mrs. Sophia Chote, Senior Counsel. And we are going to speak about a journey through law and leadership. And Mrs. Sophia Chote was admitted to practice in Trinidad and Tobago in 1989. She was awarded the title of Senior Counsel in 2011. She served as an independent senator in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago from September 2015 to August 2022. Additionally, she held the position of President of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago from 2021 to 2023 and served as Vice President of the Criminal Bar Association for many years. Mrs. Chote is the head of Alpha Chamber, and she's a wife and a mother of two. So let's welcome to this noble set, Ms. Sophia Chote, Senior Counsel. Good day.
Good day. Thank you, Rondell, for inviting me.
And thank you for being here. Of course, we are honored to have you on this noble set where many greats sat.
I know. I have heard about all these celebrities who sat in this seat before me.
You being one of them. I know before the break, we were just chatting about other areas in which antecedents, in terms of the legal word, and you mentioned something to me, and I would like you to state to our viewers and listeners.
Sure. I was just saying that antecedents really include pending cases before the court as well as convictions. That's to say cases in which the person has been found guilty. But that information has to be disclosed to the defense. It ought to be disclosed at the very beginning of the case.
Right. So there you got some additional legal language, and of course, it's always good to be corrected, and by your seniors. Thank you so much. So tell us, I know persons, many persons are familiar with your name, they're familiar with your legacy as well as, your cases, etc. But tell us a bit about you. Who is Sophia Chote?
So I thought that question might be asked, and
Yes.
in trying to formulate an answer, it made me realize I'd have to do a lot of introspection. So what I'm going to do is try to kick it down the road a bit, to use a footballing analogy, and suggest that maybe in my answers to your other questions, I will be able to convey who is Sophia Chote.
Of course, that is good. So basically, you would have been called to the bar in 1989.
Yes.
Can you share in terms of your journey as a young attorney, particularly where you would have started as a junior counsel?
Sure. Well, because I had won an island scholarship and I had studied for my degree and for my LEC on a scholarship, I had to serve the government. So I served at the office of the DPP. So I actually started my practice as a prosecutor.
Okay, and you started your practice as a prosecutor. I remember you stated that that was at the time under, is it Mr. Dolsing was the DPP at that time?
No, at first, I think the first permanent DPP we had while I was there was former Justice of Appeal Lionel Jones. Yes, he was the DPP.
All right, and that time at the DPP office, how was that experience for you? What type of matters did you get involved in? Were there any high-profile cases, etc.?
Sure. Well, the DPP's office was actually quite small at the time, but I describe it now as a star stable because you had prosecutors who all went on to greater things. For example, not only did you have a DPP who went on to become a Justice of Appeal, you had persons such as Paula May Weeks, who became President of the Republic. You had Anthony Carmona, who became President of the Republic. Ranji Dolsing became Senior Counsel. Next door to my office was Dana Sitahal, Senior Counsel. Anthony Carmona was in the office obliquely opposite me. Mark Mohammed went on to become DPP Senior Counsel and is now a Justice of the Appeal. The three other state attorneys who started with me are now all judges of the Supreme Court.
So is it that, because I know that many persons who started as DPP attorneys have all elevated to various top positions either within the state or within the judiciary. Is it that it's a trend because of the experience of being within the system?
Well, I think it was perhaps then because it was very much a testing ground. The office was very small. Because it was small, though, we had the benefit of mentorship from all of these people with a lot of experience, high levels of integrity. They were willing to share and impart their knowledge to the young ones coming in, as I was at the time. And I was quite lucky because I got to learn from all of these people, and we had to learn fast because we were doing litigation all day, every day. I mean, we were doing litigation there were courts then as far as Charlottesville, courts in Toko, courts in Maruga, and state attorneys would be required to travel to all of these places to do cases. We were doing essentially serious crimes. So we were doing murders, frauds, and that kind of thing at that level when I entered.
And in terms of, I mean, you mentioned many legal, luminaries who were High Court judges, Court of Appeal judges, etc. In terms of your success rates during that time, was it, what was the percentage, let's say, of your success rates?
Well, statistics were not such a big deal then, but I cannot recall, and perhaps this is just, something I'll have to go on memory about, but I cannot recall there being complaints about the DPP's office not being able to secure convictions. I mean, the prosecutors prosecuting in the appeal court and in the high court then were really top of the line. So there were fewer cases, of course, before the courts. So I don't recall there being a problem with success rates.
Now, you mentioned as well that one of your colleagues, and I know that she was also your dear friend, Dana Sitahal, Senior Counsel, may God rest her soul, and we would have done programs on her. But in terms of your relationship with Dana Sitahal, can you just share with us what type of relationship that you had with her, and how was it working with her, particularly young attorneys who may not have even known, well, I wouldn't say known her, but at least young attorneys now, because she's now deceased, they would not have experienced that time with her?
I was lucky because my office happened to be next door to hers. So when she returned from High Court, for example, if she walked down the corridor towards the kitchen to make a cup of coffee, I would be in the office next door. So inevitably we chatted, we developed a relationship. I think what really cemented that relationship was the July 27th, 1990 incident, where we had attended the Wine and Cheese and we could not get back to our vehicles because of where we had parked. And Dana really helped me get out of the Hall of Justice, and we went to the home of Justice Lionel Jones and spent the night there. But as I said in my other session, when we honored her, or when the Criminal Bar Association honored her, it's sometimes trauma cements your relationship. But we became very friendly after that. I mean, there were times when we would not speak for weeks, but I always knew that she was a close friend, and she continued to be a close friend until her death.
Yes, and of course, as one of the few criminal litigants in terms of advocates, rather, can you tell me, how does it, I don't know if to use the right words, how does it feel to be the minority in a male-dominated environment, particularly when it comes to practicing in a criminal bar as a female?
Well, at first I saw it as a challenge, but quite frankly, sometimes I find it quite annoying that, that people should think that female practitioners provide any less of a quality of advocacy or preparation in their criminal work than male attorneys. That certainly is not the case. But it is a bias which I faced and my predecessors at the criminal bar, the private criminal bar, faced. For example, another of my mentors is former Justice of Appeal Alice York Suhan. And I remember learning from Alice when I went into private practice and seeing what she faced as a woman. And I think she was perhaps the sole female practitioner doing almost strictly criminal law at the time, or predominantly criminal law. There were other practitioners, female practitioners doing criminal law, but Alice York Suhan certainly stood very much alone in many respects. So I saw what she went through in her practice, and I think I learned from it. I also learned what I was not going to accept. And I realized that this changes from generation to generation. So what I may have thought I could accept for my generation, I know that younger women will not accept. So there was bias. I mean, I had occasions, for example, when a couple of clients basically told me we would prefer to have a man represent us. And there was this particular incident. I did a case.
And they actually said that to you?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
No, I had no problem with
Yes,
that. I
yeah.
thought they were being honest,
Right.
and I appreciated that. And
Yeah.
I said, you know, all is good. I'll return the brief and whatnot. There was one particular case which I thought I'd done well. And at the end of it, the foreman of the jury passing by basically said to me, good job, you did a good job. But you know how it is, we like to hear it when the men talk. So I thought to myself, well, what a backhanded compliment this is. And that's why I have not paid too much attention to what people have to say.
Does that explain your serious demeanor coming out from those type of experiences as a female advocate in the criminal bar?
Perhaps, but I think I'm just a naturally serious person anyway. So maybe that's it.
Now tell us, of course, we you know, even in the media as well, as there have been a lot of commentary about persons or young attorneys practicing other areas of law rather than criminal law. I mean, I know there are a number of factors in the public domain, but tell us, why do you think that young attorneys are not following through with criminal practice, particularly young female attorneys, and how can we address that deficiency?
I think a big part of the problem is people have to appreciate that criminal law alone is not going to earn you a living. So when I entered private practice after working at the office of the DPP, I did all sorts of cases, just like you're trained to do at law school, simply because doing criminal cases would not pay my bills. At that time, a legal aid case, if you did one, was $1,500, and that case could go up to 2 months. So, and then you'd be paid the year after. So really, you weren't getting an income from criminal law. For a young practitioner, big cases are not easy to come by unless you are well connected, which I was not. Or unless, you are going to work in family chambers where work is going to be sent to you. That was not my situation. So I think we have this myth that there must be horses for courses. But I think that really, to some extent, is a privilege. I think once you are trained at the law school, you can decide to have a general practice. What made me focus on criminal law, I should say, and I know I'm not fully answering your question yet, what made me focus on criminal law is around 2000, the criminal law changed radically. There was a lot of new legislation that you had to learn about and get on top of and that kind of thing. So I decided that at this point I had to focus more of my attention on criminal law. People see me as a criminal lawyer also because the newspapers tended to report more criminal cases than civil cases. So they think, okay, well, this person is doing a lot of criminal law, and I did, but it's not to say that I did not also continue to do civil law and family law as well, even though I find that quite stressful, to be perfectly honest.
It is.
I think young women easily go to the office of the DPP as prosecutors, which is a far more dangerous job than doing litigation at the private bar. So I am a little confused. It must be the money. It must be the thought that if I do criminal law, that I'm not going to be able to make a living. But I think what they have to appreciate is that when you now come out, you generally don't have the privilege of only doing criminal law. You'll be doing many other things as well. So if that is the fallacy, I think hopefully this will do something to dispel that thought. The other thing is I have heard young women suggest that how do you deal with criminal clients? I must confess I have had far more respect and a better professional relationship with most of my criminal clients than with my civil clients.
Is it because the civil clients feel a sense of entitlement because they are paying you the bigger bucks than the criminal than litigants?
I don't know. I don't quite know what it is, but I suppose it's the line you draw as a professional.
Yes.
I'm an attorney. I'm not my client's friend, generally speaking. Yeah. So if I address my client, whether it's a civil client or a criminal client, it's Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. I'm not on a first name basis with anybody. And my clients address me in the same way. So once you have that distance in your relationship between attorney and client, then I don't think there would be a problem.
Now, a lot of young lawyers, as I said, they go directly into other types of legal practice. But as an attorney, particularly myself, within 1 year of my practice, I practiced criminal law, and I've always been told, and it's always inculcated in me, that in order to be a great advocate, you must have practiced criminal law. You must get involved in criminal law practice because it's the ability to think on your feet, it's the ability to formulate arguments within minutes, and obviously it's you become a good orator. And I don't think many young attorneys or new attorneys understand that, or maybe they don't appreciate it. and of course maybe due to COVID as well, a lot of attorneys did not get that experience, and therefore when they came out of the bar or when they came into the bar, their vision was skewed. What do you have to say about that?
So I think two things I learned when I was at the DPP's office and then when I went into private practice in a set of small chambers, but there were really good people there. Bindra Dol Singh, who recently passed, was one of my mentors. Kenneth Lala was the head of chambers. Kenneth Lala had been involved in a lot of work involving tribunals and so on. And another attorney, Kenny Narayan Singh, but Kenny did essentially conveyancing and commercial work. So I think from those two groups of people, I learned that you are good on your feet if you have prepared. Your level of preparation must be very high. It doesn't really have to do with criminal law or civil law. It has to do with your level of preparation, your familiarity with the content of the material that you are using. I think that is absolutely crucial. I think people tend to forget that. Being an orator is not a skill which I ever thought I had, especially, but I think what helped me along the way was the fact that I knew my work inside out. So I understood it and I was able to explain it in a clear manner, which I think is what makes a good orator.
Yes, that is true. And you had a stint at the Hewarding Law School.
Yes.
Can you just tell us about that journey?
That was interesting. I was asked to take over as director of the criminal practice and procedure course because Dana was on sabbatical while she was writing her text, Commonwealth Criminal Practice and Procedure.
The go-to Bible, as we call it.
Yes, yes. So it was interesting for me. I come from a family of teachers. So I think to some extent, the way in which we communicate as a family involves a lot of teaching. So it was actually quite interesting to teach at that level and to see how another generation of lawyers was learning, what they found to be interesting, what they did not find to be interesting, and whether anything had changed from when I had been at Hewarding between 1987 to 1989. But overall, I thought it was quite enriching for me.
1987 to 1989, that was when, yeah, so therefore you taught or you tutored there about 2 years? Lectured?
Yes. I think I continued to tutor for a bit after that, but I can't quite remember now.
Okay, and let's move on. You were president of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
That is the governing body for all attorneys at law. Now, as a female attorney, elevating to that position and being in charge of the jurisdiction of the association. Tell us your experience elevating that position and what notable achievements was done under your leadership.
So I don't think that I was the first female president of the Law Association. I certainly know that Stephanie Daly, senior counsel, had been president of the Law Association before, and there may have been other women. So I was not the first woman to lead the Law Association. I think what was important for me was to ensure, and I say this with no apology, that the Law Association did not become involved in political battles. That is not our mandate under the Legal Profession Act. I don't think necessarily that everyone was happy with me about that, but it was something that I tried to hold very firm on, because I think that we have a responsibility to our members to act in accordance with the Legal Profession Act, full stop. And I think if I had any small success for that period of time, perhaps that would be one that I privately would count as a success. Other people may see it differently.
Yeah, and I agree with you because, being at the bar and obviously interacting with attorneys of my calling, there has been a lot of notion that the Law Association tend to be a political party group, right? And whether it is whichever party, whomever party it's believed to be supporting. But I'm happy that you raised that point because in time, the Law Association would have intervened in matters of a political nature, whether it is dealing with legislation. But I do note, but I can't state now, that there was an instance where the Law Association was directly involved in a tit for tat. I believe this was with the Chief Justice, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, that was when Mr. Mendez was president, I believe. But
yes.
Remember that I don't think that you can really associate the process or that whole process with one president, because remember there had been special general meetings, and the president and the council of the Law Association at that time was acting on the mandate of its membership. So I don't think that it would be fair to say, well, a president decided that this is where the Law Association would go, or this is a step the Law Association would take, or a council decided. No, it was a body of the Law Association that made those decisions.
And do you think that the Law Association provides...
and why was that political, though?
With respect
why
to...
Why would you say that it was political?
I think probably because, I mean, I guess the subjective commentaries from different individuals or different attorneys suggested that the Law Association was favoring one side over the next. And I think because the societies is, I mean, it's polarized, and therefore you have persons with basically different political views and agendas, and it is skewed. Sometimes law and politics sometimes it becomes blurred, and as a result of that, and as a result of persons' personal opinions, it sometimes reflects badly on the association.
Well, I disagree. I don't think our society is polarized. If we were, we wouldn't be able to function as well as we do. I think there are people in society who are hardliners, and those include lawyers, or some lawyers. But generally speaking, on a day-to-day basis, the average citizen goes about his business and gets along well with his neighbor. And that is something we need to emphasize instead of assuming what the political pundits say is correct. That is to say that we are polarized in, generally speaking, as a society. I don't think that's true.
And maybe you are correct. Of course, when you look at the society and as a whole interacting with each other on a daily basis, but then it seems as though behind the keyboard of social media, it gives a totally different perspective of, okay, is this our society? And that is the reason why I made that suggestion, or that we are polarized, because it's almost as though I can be speaking to you and thinking we are good, and then when I'm looking at social media and seeing your comment, it's like a drastic change in perspective, and it makes one think, okay, what is this person's real mindset?
Correct, but then when you think about it, we don't have any studies to say, but they're probably just a small group of people on their keyboards, fighting battles in their heads and with their screens, and perhaps not even with real people on the other side, for all we know. So I would like to think that that's not a very large percentage, and certainly that can't be reflective of the society in which I live and work, and in which I go to the grocery, and in which I go to the doctor, and in which I go to the bank and relate with people on a day-to-day basis. That's not my society. Understood clearly.
Now, you also on the leadership role of the Criminal Bar Association. You were vice president.
Yes, when it started, I think the person who started the Criminal Bar Association was Desmond Allen, senior counsel. Yeah. And Alice York Suhan, I think, was the first vice president, and at some point I became vice president and remained in that position for quite a while. Yes.
So the intent of the Criminal Bar Association, is it voluntarily, is a voluntary membership organization, not so?
Yes.
Yeah, versus the Law Association, which is mandatory.
Correct.
For all attorneys to be members of. Now, in terms of the successes of the Criminal Bar Association or its intent, do you believe that the association has been following its mandate of basically not spreading the good news, but actually advocating for better legislation, advocating for the rights, better conditions of practitioners as well as prisoners, in terms of the prison system, etc.?
For a voluntary group, I will say yes. I'll say that there have been times where you've had more activity and times when you've had less activity. But for example, I recall the Criminal Bar Association intervening. This is before the Law Association had intervened in a matter involving sentencing, if I'm not mistaken. And Mrs. Pamela Elder, Senior Counsel, had led the arguments on behalf of the Criminal Bar Association, made a very powerful contribution, I think, which assisted in a high-quality judgment by the Court of Appeal. So the Criminal Bar has been engaged in that kind of activism. We have also quietly been consulted by different administrations, and I suspect this may still be the case under Mr. Khan, Senior Counsel, on proposed legislation, and we've spent hours and hours of time and work commenting and giving feedback and making proposals and that kind of thing. So yes, we have done quite a bit of work. The Criminal Bar Association came about because at that time it was thought that the Law Association in those days paid insufficient attention to the problems that criminal practitioners had been facing. So we formed our own association and tried to address the issues through that association.
And does the Law Association, does the Criminal Bar Association work together with the Law Association in terms of critical legislations that required comments, or is it a separate entity whereby the Criminal Bar Association does their own thing, Law Association does their own thing?
No idea, because I am no longer on the Council of the Law Association, but I would imagine there is some consultation. There may be occasions when they will do their individual bits of contribution and so on, and there may be times when they will collaborate, but I can't say for sure.
Now, law and politics. Mm-hmm. You have served as an independent senator.
Yes.
Quite distinguishedly, I must say, for 3 terms.
No, I only wish to serve. I was appointed in 2015, and I handed in my resignation in 2020. I did not want to serve more than 1 term.
So tell us that experience first. One, being appointed, that call that you received, I believe that in 2015, it was President Carmona. That call you received, about, well, we want you to serve. How was that? How was that for you?
Well, at first I was excited because it was something new. So I thought intellectually it would be a challenge. I mean, parliamentarians are legislators, so this was, in my mind, another area of the law that I could learn about and have input into. So I found that quite exciting. When I realized what it entailed, perhaps I had my moments when I thought this is really not what I signed up for. But overall, I totally enjoyed my 5-year term, and I would like to think that I made a valuable contribution.
And I mean, you served as a member of many standing committees within Parliament.
Yes, I was chair of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, and we did, I hate to say it, but these joint select committees do fabulous work. They are often assisted by experts in the various fields, and the reports are there as part of Parliament's record. So when I hear nowadays about people talking about fixing NIS and this kind of thing, I wish that we don't keep repeating work that we've done already, that we inform ourselves by using the material and the resources which our people have had input into and which are easily accessible. So, I think certainly the reports of all joint select committees would be useful if people simply go and look for what is said in there and the material provided and so on. They are a valuable resource.
And most joint select committees, if not all, they are public. So
Correct.
Now with the technology that the Parliament website has, and even on the normal media, you can actually view those joint select committees,
Yes.
which I find interesting as well. So tell us in terms of your role in changing or reforming the criminal justice system through legislation. How were you able to achieve or convince the government of the day in terms of taking your suggestions on the law and amending certain acts of parliament, or rather when a bill comes before the House, did they take your counsel in terms of amending or changing certain clauses of those particular acts?
Yeah, so I
Or
don't
bills,
think,
rather?
I don't know that that would be unique to me. Perhaps on occasion, what I said carried some weight because I've been in practice for a long time. I have, I would say I have that as a specialty, so I know criminal practice and procedure. I am familiar with the criminal laws and so on. So at times I would feel that, okay, what I was saying was being taken into account. At other times, regrettably, that wasn't the case. But that is what happens. I don't have any special voice in Parliament. I just have to try to make my point and make it effectively.
And I believe that maybe you did, particularly, looking at the one of the joint select committees. I believe that you took part in was the criminal flow management.
Case management.
Yes.
Yes. That was actually, that may have been the first one we did. We did a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, one of the more exciting things that we did was one on food fraud, for example. And I have to tell you, as an independent senator, you don't get any assistance whatsoever. You don't have research assistance. You may go to the...
Oh, you don't? You don't have staff assigned to you?
No, and you don't caucus with your colleagues. You are supposed to be entirely independent. So you do your research on your own. You buy your resources for yourself, and you prepare, in accordance with that. And that sometimes can be a little burdensome, but it was exciting. I mean, preparation is everything, as I keep saying. So that was one of the more interesting inquiries that we did as a joint select committee. Funnily enough, I don't put the legal inquiries at the top of the list, perhaps because that's my field. So I found the other inquiries more exciting because I was learning from these people coming in to talk about the area, and also learning or benefiting from the knowledge of experts.
And tell us, I'm putting you on the spot. Why? I mean, you mentioned it before. Why did you decide not to renew for a second term if you were selected? Well, I'm sure you probably was selected.
Yes,
too.
I did. I was asked whether I would want to continue, but I had given myself 5 years to do this. How should I put this? I think people must not be too wedded to positions. I also do think that it's important for the public to hear the views and voices of others. I do not intend by this statement to criticize long-serving members of any House of Parliament, any of the Houses of Parliament. They serve for different reasons, but I thought that perhaps people needed to hear a different voice, or maybe to hear a different position from a different lawyer. So I really did not think that I should overstay my welcome, as it were.
And did you at the time work alongside Professor Ramesh Diosaran?
No. I think he.
Oh, that was.
Yes, he was way before my time. Yes, he started with Senator at the time that Senator Sita Hall was an independent senator. Yes.
And who are some of the independent senators you worked alongside with? Well, during that tenure in Parliament.
Well, I came in with a group which included the current coordinator of the independent bench, Senator Paul Richards. Who came in with me? There were two young women who came in with me, Senator Jennifer Rafool and Senator Melissa Ramkisoon. There was Senator Stephen Crease who came in with me, and I will have to apologize, but I think those are the senators who came in 2015 with me.
And you mentioned coordinator of the independent bench. Is it that the head of the bench, or is it that they are just?
No, they just arrange the practical matters. So they will speak to the leaders of the other benches, the opposition and the government, and you'll get an idea. Okay, what is being called first? Is something being stood down on the agenda? What time are we likely to sit until today? What time are we likely to take the tea break? So on and so forth. And also the coordinator will give an idea to the president of the Senate as to the order of speakers.
Okay, because that was my next question.
Yes.
I know the government and the opposition caucus, they have a leader of government business or a leader of opposition, leader of the opposition bench, and therefore they would communicate with the speaker, of the Senate in terms of, or the House, who speaks. So that the order of
no, it's different.
No, it's different
because you see, they have their party caucuses,
yes,
and they determine who will speak and on what.
So how
they
do
determine on how the coordinator will say, okay, who is speaking on this bill, and perhaps send a little list down. And if you have a preference as to when you want to speak, then perhaps you might indicate that, I want to speak after this person or so on. And that's it.
Okay, that is interesting.
Yes.
Do you think, why do you think lawyers are attracted to politics?
Because parliamentarians are legislators, and lawyers know about legislation. So it's an easy transition to become a legislator. But I want to point out that most parliamentarians are not lawyers. So
Correct.
Lawyers might be attracted to politics, but when you look at the composition of parliament, it's not really filled up with lawyers. It's filled up with people from many other professions. I mean, you may find quite a few lawyers there, and you may find lawyers who are very strong in their advocacy because of what they do. So maybe people think there are more lawyers simply because the lawyers speak more in Parliament. And of course, an attorney general is a lawyer.
Correct.
And an attorney general pilots the legislation.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I know there's a thin line in terms of persons feel as though politicians are not to be trusted, it can damage your reputation, etc. Would you recommend to young attorneys to enter politics for the purpose of nation building or giving back to your society, despite being exposed to public scrutiny, defamation, and all these various things that comes with politics and your reputation?
Well, I have to tell you, that's a trick question because I'm currently engaged in a group called Women Parliamentarians of Trinidad and Tobago, which is a caucus of former female parliamentarians. And we are engaged in a project whereby we are training young women to be leaders in Parliament. So I don't think that I can say that I will not encourage women to participate in the parliamentary process, and these young women include some lawyers. But for me, I saw when I was a senator a perspective of Parliament which I had not had before, and there is a certain level of cynicism within or amongst parliamentarians, and this is just my view, and I don't have to really explain it to anybody else, quite frankly. There's a level of cynicism, and sometimes there is a level of disconnect between what goes on in those debates and I think the lives of the people who will be affected by those debates.
And politics really is supposed to be, I mean, where we say law is a noble profession, I believe politics should be a noble profession as well, or it ought to be. But of course, you know, as you said, persons enter the parliament or politics for various reasons, whether it be good and bad. But I mean, my view is politics is a good thing. You need you need the politicians.
You need leaders.
You need
yes,
leaders.
Sure.
You need legislators. But then somewhere along the line, things probably get sort of blurred.
No, I think a lot of it is hubris. I mean, some people, in some cases, you find the ego exceeds the ability. And you find people get caught up in the trappings of the position that they hold and so on. And it must take a really strong person to be able to withstand that, or somebody who is really grounded or centered to be able to withstand that kind of pressure year in, year out. And unfortunately, parliamentarians are on call 24/7. Yeah. I think people underestimate the work that they do.
Yeah. Parliamentarians, many professions, judges, attorneys. But moving on to the appeal courts, the appellant courts. You have had extensive experience as a appellant practitioner as well. Now, with the CCJ being in existence in Trinidad and Tobago, or rather in existence for almost 20 years, do you support the establishment
Absolutely.
of the CCJ?
No question about it. I think if you look at how the English courts are deciding their cases, if you keep an eye on it, I think that there is certainly a more conservative approach to their decision making, which will probably have repercussions for us in terms of the composition of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and also in terms of how they interpret our Caribbean constitutions, because remember, the English have a parliamentary democracy, we have a constitutional democracy, and people might think it's just quibbling about words, but I think there is a deep philosophical difference between the two. And I see no reason at this stage for people continually suggesting that the CCJ somehow is an inferior body, or it's inferior in capacity, or it's inferior in the quality of the work that it will produce. It has now been in existence for many years, and its work product speaks for itself. People who hold on, and this has become a bit of a political football, unfortunately, and I wish that sometimes in Parliament people can drop the whip. I think the presence of a whip in Parliament sometimes prevents people from voting according to conscience, or voting according to what they think is right as opposed to what is the party line. Yeah. Because I certainly do think we should accede to the Caribbean Court of Justice. There's absolutely no good reason for not doing so.
I mean, many commentators, even attorneys, are suggesting that the CCJ may lack transparency when it comes to certain high-profile matters, and therefore the lords of the Privy Council, they have no interest in the Caribbean politics, and therefore that is why.
Well, why do you assume? Why are we assuming? Why do we always sell ourselves short?
Short, yes.
I mean, is this a colonial hangover? Is this a need for validation from the foreign other? I think, you know, we should be more mature than that. I don't know how the CCJ lacks transparency. I don't know how the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council has greater transparency than the CCJ. I can't make sense, quite frankly, of that comment if it came from someone or whoever it came from without knowing more about it. But I don't know how transparency is an issue at all.
And I mean, and I mean, the Caribbean on its own, you know, Trinidad and Tobago, we have great legal minds.
Of course.
And therefore, you know, I mean, I support your argument, and I just hope that maybe soon we would be able to accede at some point in time.
And just remember, I don't want to interrupt you,
Sure.
but just remember that the CCJ judges are chosen, I believe, by the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And we have a representative on that body. Trinidad and Tobago has a representative on that body, perhaps more than one, but I certainly can recall one representative who is a very prominent and well-respected senior counsel, Alvin Fitzpatrick, senior counsel, serves on the RJLSE. So, you know, I don't know that Mr. Fitzpatrick would serve on a body which is not doing its job. No. I certainly don't think that he would. I have way too high a regard for him to even think of such a thing. So we must have some confidence in ourselves.
I agree. And as we mentioned, as we're on the topic of senior counsel, I mean, you have been appointed in 2011, over a decade ago. And recently there has been a lot of discussions and court challenge regarding the appointment process for senior counsel. Do you think that the procedure should be reviewed?
I agree with that. I agree with the report sent, I think it was in 2012, that the procedure should be reviewed. But I don't want to say too much because I know that the Law Association is an intervener in the matter which is engaging the High Court. Criminal Bar Association is as well. Or it was brought by the Criminal Bar Association, if I recall. So that's a live matter. But yes, it certainly is up for review. And I thought it interesting that two of the recipients of this year's awards reported as having said that they too think that the process should be looked at.
Yeah, and I also believe that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's one of the highest order that could be conferred onto a judicial officer or practitioner. And congratulations to all. I mean, one day maybe I may apply, but I don't think I am deserving as yet. And it's something that, you know, ought to be deserving to deserving persons, right? But I don't want to go into too much into that. You have already made your comment. Now let's deal with access to justice. Now there have been a lot of complaints from the general public that fees are very high, and while there are legal aid services, etc., the legal aid services are sometimes very limited. So what more do you think the legal profession can do to improve access to justice? Particularly coming from the fact that you were former president of the Law Association, a practicing attorney as well.
What can we do to improve access to justice? I mean, the criminal bar is shrinking, and it's shrinking because it doesn't provide sufficient paying work. It's also shrinking because I think sometimes when people change processes, they forget that a significant part of maintaining the rule of law is to have a vibrant criminal bar. The criminal practitioners and other practitioners, I think I must place on the record, we do pro bono work for deserving cases. So it is not as though lawyers are here, and I'm sure that social media will be replete with instances where people say lawyers are all fat cats, they haven't done a thing, they haven't worked a day in their life, and all they do is collect fees. But at the end of the day, we provide a very specialized kind of knowledge and experience when we take your case, and we try to do it to the best of our ability. And if you go to a lawyer who doesn't provide you with that service, then certainly you have options that you can pursue. You can take that attorney if you think you have not been served in accordance with the Legal Profession Act. You can take that person to the disciplinary committee. So I think that we are really trying to do our best for the community. I think we have been hit by two things which have impacted the quality of justice. One is virtual courts. I think, and this is just my view, and I don't expect there to be any uproar about this, but I think a virtual court is not as unaccountable a platform as real live court. And I think, unfortunately, litigants suffer most from that process. I think we must return to live courts. I also think that the Legal Profession Act has to be amended to ensure that those who enter practice have an idea of what practicing law is about. Because there is now a process which allows persons to get a degree and then get an LPC or an LPC equivalent, which is an English accreditation. And an LPC equivalent can amount sometimes to paralegal accreditation. So this person is coming out. If that person sets up or puts up a shingle and starts offering legal services, that person does not necessarily know what the practice of law is about. That person may not even know what Trinidad and Tobago legislation is about. Law Association has spoken to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General, I know, is receptive to this. I suppose it's just a question of putting it on the parliamentary timetable. But that Legal Profession Act, in my view, has to be amended, and has to be amended urgently to close that gap.
Yeah. And finally, mentorship. What role does mentorship play in your professional life, and what legacy do you hope to leave to future generation of attorneys?
Well, I don't really think
2 minutes.
Mentorship is important to me. As I say, I love teaching, even teaching those in chambers.
And many persons would have gone through in-service.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I take in-service trainees, generally speaking, every year. I don't take too many because I like to have an in-depth relationship with them to make sure they understand what the process is. I'm not into the whole dressing up in fancy suits and parading about the place. I'm more into teaching you how to learn the law, how to research, how to get a good quality product out, basically. And I think if my legacy has to be anything, it is continue learning, because I learn from my in-service trainees.
Yeah. Yeah, because they are more involved in technology, and diversity and inclusion, etc.
Of course.
Finally, in 30 seconds, anything that you want to share further with us and your viewers and listeners?
Not in particular, and certainly not in 30 seconds.
Or that might inspire all of us.
I don't think women, if it's anything, and I can say it just for the sake of saying it, but women should not fear criminal practice at all. There's nothing there to fear. There's
nothing there to fear. Yes? Sophia Chote, Senior Counsel, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. You see, time flew, and it's a wrap. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So guys, it's a wrap. You have been watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Thank you for viewing. Thanks to my guest, Mrs. Sophia Chote, Senior Counsel. And before I go, I leave you with this quote, of course. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. Robert Louis Stevenson. Have a good one. God bless.